few weeks back, I witnessed the main part of an 11-car accident. Well, I told some of you about this. I was heading west on Highway 30 when this guy goes shooting right past me on the right like a bat out of the closet and jumps the curb and starts slamming into cars in the Chuck E. Cheese parking lot. Well, a lot of feelings go through you then. You know, there's shock. Is this really happening? And fear and worry for the driver. You know, is he going to live? And excitement and a feeling that it was pretty cool. I'm not proud of that. In fact, I'm rather angry at myself for feeling that way. But the fact is, many of us do have a twinge of excitement at the sight of chaos. Why? What is it about disaster and destruction that kind of grabs us and even gives us a sick thrill? Is it the fury of the action? I mean, is normality just kind of boring? Or does a sudden threat switch on the problem-solving part of our brain? Or is there so much inner rage and chaos in some people that they can't stand peace and quiet very long? Are they kind of chaos junkies? Do they need the high drama of disaster as a drug to make them feel alive, even if it hurts other people and eventually themselves? Or does the world seem so hopelessly messed up and evil that some people just want to burn the place down? Just burn it down. Or do we think we'll be safer and better off if certain people and places just get blown up? Or is devastation tasty as revenge against people who we don't like? I don't know. Maybe there's another reason. Though we don't like to think about it, in the back of our minds we know that plenty of bad stuff happens in the world every day. You know, wildfires, shootings, crashes, and any of it could happen to us at any time. So it's a weird kind of relief when we see it happen to somebody else instead. Those guys over there, at least this time, we feel we've dodged the bullet. Well, why am I talking about all this? Because our reading today may stir up some of this horror and fascination with destruction. Jesus and the disciples, you know, are like the people from Bean Blossom in downtown Chicago. Look at all these buildings, man, you know, beautiful. And Jesus says, yeah, they're going to be smashed to the ground. Really? When? And people have been wondering ever since, when? For example, all of the end-of-the-world enthusiasts who build their prophecy charts and look for all the signs grab hold of texts like this with both hands. They love them. The more troubled and violent the world becomes, the more excited they get because Jesus has to be coming soon. Well, when people ask me, you know, is this the end of the world? My answer is we should be so lucky. A lot of the garbage that happens is just flat out garbage. Flat out garbage. So I guess my first thought this morning is a very simple one. We must resist all temptations to enjoy real disasters in any way. Anybody's disaster, anywhere. In my mind, I go back to how I felt watching the Twin Towers fall, the World Trade Center. I was just so sick and horrified. It was like a gut punch because it hit so close to home. That's how we ought to feel. The collapse of anyone's temple is a source of grief and suffering. The burning of anyone's home is a catastrophe. Even if it may sort of support some pet theory we have or advance some favorite cause, no, it's a disaster. I worry a little because this willingness to indulge horror for the sake of some greater good has cropped up over and over again in human history. I remember reading something that was written by an Italian intellectual just prior to the First World War. He said, "The most beautiful sight for me would be to watch all the masterpieces of European art floating down the rivers to the sea and see the libraries and museums in flames. Because that will open the ground for all of us creative people to do our thing." And then there was the British poet Rupert Brooke, who enlisted in the army as the First World War broke out and said, "Now God be thanked who has blessed us with this hour." And he talked about leaping like swimmers into cleanness. He died a few months later, along with 9 to 11 million other young men. This urge for creative destruction drove young men to march off to the great adventure. It drove master races to prove their superiority on the field of blood. It fueled the start of both world wars in the last century. It has lit up revolutions which end up devouring their children. Joseph Stalin, in the name of creative destruction, killed 20 million of his own people. The willingness of horrors. Well, enough said. Point made. For our purpose, the heart of this reading comes when Jesus gives us a warning. When the world starts to look like it's falling apart, don't let anyone lead you astray. Because a lot of people are going to come along and say, "I'm the guy you need right now." Don't listen. Let's think about that a little bit. Let's put ourselves back in those days. Jesus is talking about the collapse of the temple in Jerusalem. Something that drastic was impossible to imagine. The temple was the largest building most people in those parts had ever seen in their lives and would ever see. Many experienced travelers considered it the most beautiful building in the ancient world. Beyond that, the temple was fabulously rich and successful. The men who ran it were the most capable, powerful people in the land. The temple was the institution that held everything together, and now Jesus says it's coming down. I'm straining to think of something that we would have similar feelings about. It reminds me of that true story, by the way, about the time a passenger was getting on board the Titanic and asked one of the crew, "Is this ship really unsinkable?" And the crewman's response was, "Lady, God himself could not sink this ship." Well. Imagine what we would feel like with the utter final collapse of Wall Street, all levels of government, and even the NFL. Such a thing would not be possible. We could not wrap our minds around such a thing. And don't even talk about it if you don't want to get in trouble. And Jesus is saying, it's going to happen. My movement will survive that. Don't give up on me, that's all. And when you think about it, look back over the 2,000 years since Jesus rose from the dead. Just think how many strong, powerful empires have collapsed in that time. Rome went down. The Holy Roman Empire went down. Spain's empire went down. England's empire went down. France's, all of them are gone. The Tsar was gone. The communists are gone. So many of these thought that they would surely be able to wipe out this little ragtag Messiah and his band of followers without breaking a sweat. And some of them thought that Jesus wouldn't stand a chance in this world unless their empire helped him out a little bit and did the heavy lifting. They're all gone now. Jesus is still here, as strong and healthy as ever. And the same is true when our little worlds go crashing down. Someone's world crashes to the ground every single day, while the rest of us go on with our normal business. Every day in the courthouse, every day in the intensive care unit or the emergency room, someone's life is falling to the ground. A marriage collapses, or a loved one dies, or health breaks, or a career falls apart, or someone loses millions from the pension fund, or our tiny grasp of who God is falls apart in our hands. These little temples that we build to try to house God fall to the ground. And it's agony when they do. And we're tempted then just to give up. But all Jesus reminds us of is, I warned you that would happen, but I am still here. I will always be here. Don't let anyone deceive you. Don't give up on me. You will survive.